and welcome to the PocketGamer.biz podcast week in mobile games, where we discuss the week's news and provide some insights. I'm Craig Chapple, head of content at PocketGamer.biz, and with me today is Aaron Astle, our news editor, for our 51st episode. No longer that special.
Yeah, I'm back in regular old clothes today. No fancy shirt.
I mean, I think I was in a hoodie last time. But how you doing, Aaron? What have you been up to?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Not been too eventful, really, in my life the past week. Still playing Xenoblade Chronicles X, because it's a very long game. Making
Playing that for a few years yet.
Very gradual progress. Quite a lot of my free time's been on that. I think, I went out for some drinks last weekend, but nowhere too exciting. I've sort of come down from as we've said, my birthday week was just so full on. It's hard to compete with it on a regular week now.
You've had that high.
Yeah.
Now everything doesn't feel the same anymore.
Yeah, but no, all good here. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I've not been up to too much. I'm old these days, so I forget literally what I've been doing in recent memory. I don't know if I did anything at the weekend. I watched The Electric State on Netflix, which was okay. I've said this, but it's such a Netflix movie where it's just like, I mean, it's done by the Russos that did Avengers, and they did some really good stuff on Community, which I love, the TV series. And but it was just like, all right, nothing special. It's a very okay film.
Yeah, because I wrote about the mobile game a few weeks ago, but I haven't seen the film.
I haven't played the mobile game, actually. I had it demoed to me by the developer was Buck. There's just like a really small team within this huge company called Buck, and I think they do like animations. I can't remember what they did on Amazon. I think they did Love, Death and Robots. I think they did that, and then now they've got a games division. Now you showed me that, it was pretty cool. Like the genesis of it was actually quite interesting, and then which is kind of like retro feel, because the film is set in an alternate universe, but in the 90s, which is an interesting combination. If it's in an alternate universe with a different history, why set it in the 90s? Anyway, and then they kind of did the same with Fronglets, which was, the game is like retro from like the 90s era. So I guess that just seems to be a random theme with Netflix games at the moment. Other things I've been doing, I've been trying to, as always, I do try and actually play games. I have this separate YouTube channel where I just upload like gameplay videos. So I played Disney Solitaire, which we didn't talk about last week. It's like, I guess, one of the biggest launches of the year, so we should give it a mention. There's an interview on the site, please do check it out, with Superplay's CEO. You know, they were bought for, I think it's actually about $2 billion by Playtika. And this is their third game after Dice Dreams and Domino Dreams. Interesting to see how it does. Every single mobile games publisher seems to have a solitaire game. Played through it, it was pretty cool. It was a Beauty and the Beast first sort of section, I guess, stage. Play a few levels of that. It was really well polished. We'll see how it does. See if there's an audience for that. I guess they're pretty confident. And in the interview, it was actually interesting because they said it's a top-down approach, which you don't hear that often these days, not publicly anyway. Where, you know, the management team says, well, this is the game we're going to make. They also, once they start making a game, at least what they say, the R-wise, I guess, is that that's the game they're going to release. They're not going to not release it. So, which I thought was interesting. I'm sure very secretly, perhaps there's been some cancelled games, right? But I think once it's kind of public, it doesn't go through like a public soft launch and then get cancelled. They go through with it. And to have 3 successes with that strategy is, well, sorry, correction, 2 successes with that strategy remains to be seen with Disney.
Yeah, tentative third.
Yeah, maybe. And the other big release while I'm at it was Grunt Rush. I played a bit of that. I am quite a sucker for these games now, where we've got the gate mechanics. And there's something about it. I just get drawn to the ads as well. Like, I'm watching like StarCraft on YouTube, and then an ad will come up for like Last War, and I'll just watch it. I'll just watch this stupid ad. There was one the other day that surprised me because they actually made it through like the correct gates. They shot down the new weapons in the right amount of time, and they actually won the level. And I was like, that's quite satisfying.
Yeah.
Usually they lose. Anyway, God, that's a bit of a random. But the game, the other game I wanted to mention that's out today is Clair Obscur. Expedition 33. It's a PC console. It's on Game Pass, which I, after slagging off quite a lot, I actually use Game Pass a fair bit now, so I'm a total hypocrite. But I don't know that much about it, but I've been following it a little bit, but since I don't necessarily, I don't cover those games like specifically, make sure I'm aware of it, but I don't actually want to know the details because the story, the look of it, even some of the gameplay, all looks quite unique. So I'm just kind of intrigued to go through that world. Really, yeah, looks nice. You should check it out.
Yeah, I'll have a look.
Anyway, I guess we have a podcast to do. As always, a few shout outs for our events. So, Dubai Game Expo Summit coming very soon, May 7th to 8th. Also, next week, I am in Brazil for Gamescom Latam. So, again, if anyone wants to reach out, I've had a couple of people for meetings, then please do. Pocket Gamer Connects Barcelona, which is looking great already, to be honest. I've never actually been to Spain itself. I've only been to Ibiza as a kid. I wasn't there partying. So PGC Barcelona, June 3rd to 4th. PGC Summit in Shanghai, July 30th. Got Helsinki, October 7th and 8th. Jordan later this year. Some other events. Mobile Games Awards in August during Gamescom. And probably some other stuff. So with all of that, we'll actually go on to the news. So this week's big story is the headline: the EU slaps Apple with a $570 million, which is about 500 million euros, fine for violating the Digital Markets Act. So this is the fine that has been coming since, well, for a long time. I think it was reported in November or December that the fine was going to come by the end of the year. And then about a few weeks ago, a month ago, it was like, oh, it's about to come, like in this week. It didn't. It's finally here. Apple was found to have breached anti-steering rules following an investigation into its business practices. So under the DMA, app developers must be allowed to inform users of and direct them to alternative offers outside of the Apple App Store, which under the general rules of the App Store, you can't do. Under the alternative business terms, you could actually do link outs, but Apple then still demanded a cut of that revenue for like the next year, which is just daft. I can't actually remember if that was for the first purchase or subsequent purchases. I imagine it's the latter because they're like, well, we give you that user, so we get that money, which is obviously ridiculous. And Apple kept changing their business terms. And I was saying before this, like, do you know what? I'm confused about some of the rules that the DMA is asking for and what Apple's terms are, because they've managed to like muddy the waters and confuse it enough with their ridiculous and ever-changing terms. You could argue they were doing it to try and they weren't really, but like to try and adhere to the DMA, or rather maintain the status quo, but try and get around it somehow. But yeah, the European Commission has found that Apple restricts linking out, preventing developers from fully using alternative distribution channels and stopping consumers from accessing potentially cheaper options. It said, as part of today's decision, the Commission has ordered Apple to remove the technical and commercial restrictions on steering and to refrain from perpetuating the non-compliant conduct in the future, which includes adopting conduct with an equivalent object or effect. So, kind of what I was saying, trying to maintain the status quo by just changing the rules a bit. The fine imposed on Apple takes into account the gravity and duration of the non-compliance, which is funny because this fine is probably lower than it would have been had the Trump administration not come in January and just suddenly like treating. I try not to get political, but like effectively just treating allies and the rest of the world like crap for some reason. About anything. Part of my reason for saying that is JD Vance obviously came over and just basically ridiculed the EU for some reason. I'm still not really sure why he did that, other than to speak to people at home. And I think it was Reuters reported, like their sources claimed that was one of the reasons that the EU was going to impose a lower fine. And it is lower than previous fines that have been dealt out. And 500 million is not nothing, but this is a multi-trillion-dollar company. Like the fine itself doesn't matter. I think they will get, if they don't adhere to this, but they are going to fight it. If they don't adhere to it, there will be further fines. So we'll see how that rumbles on. And we'll see if Apple actually complies or not. We've reached out to, well, Aaron, you've been reaching out to a few people and you've had a few comments. What did you get?
Yeah, so Ilya from the Games Fund said that the enforcement of the Digital Markets Act is a meaningful step towards creating a more open, competitive digital environment. So he thinks the verdict is a fair one, considering the long-standing concerns around like walled garden policies, obviously like the control over app distribution and data consent. So he thinks that Apple and Meta are going to comply with what's been ordered, basically. And he suggested that while the change may be complex for like platforms of that size, there's kind of a clear direction of global markets shifting towards transparency, user empowerment, and interoperability.
So we also had Martin Spans from the Dutch Games Association. So thanks for sending these comments. They'll be on the site possibly by the time this podcast goes out, or if not, early in the week. Yeah, Martin said, considering the time of the news, it's not hard to see this verdict in the light of the recent tumult around the imposed USA tariffs and the discussion around the dominance of California-based big tech. Yeah, she says, judging by Apple's first public statements in reply to the verdict, I think they won't just accept these fines without a fight. It can certainly help if game developers, publishers, and platforms share any finding on Apple's further non-compliance with DMA with the European Commission, which is quite fighting talk. I think we actually spoke, might have been Chris James, our CEO, spoke a couple of weeks ago, about a month ago when he was on. That actually it's a bit different these days because, like with this comment, and I wouldn't be surprised if others already do speak up. Like 10 years ago, maybe no one would say a thing publicly about Apple. I've certainly had in the past people like, "Can you comment on this?" And they're like, "There's no way I could comment on that." Not publicly as their name anyway. Whereas now, I think people are much more comfy with that. And then she goes on to say, and now after Apple and Meta, it seems likely that Alphabet is next because the commission has also found they are not fully compliant with the DMA. So we'll go into that in a bit as well. Google is in hot water in the US. It's kind of like potentially a bit of a breaking up of Google. We could discuss whether that's good or bad. Just worth saying, in regards to what Martine said there about Apple's reaction to the fine, they said today's announcement are yet another example of the European Commission unfairly targeting Apple in a series of decisions that are bad for the privacy and security of our users, bad for products, and force us to give away our technology for free. I mean, all right. Doesn't really... I don't believe it does that at all. Because ultimately, Apple still makes a tremendous amount of money from their platform. And like for a 30% fee, which is crazy high, like I feel like they could have, I guess as a public company, it's very difficult to do this. But if they had been able to lower their fee, like properly, to 10, 15% or whatever, or like scale it, so like Steam does, you could argue they've kind of scaled it the other way, where they've gone, all right, it's a lower cut if you make under $1 million. And then Steam, which are private companies, so don't get that much insight into their revenue. But I'm sure they're doing absolutely fine. Steam's more popular than ever. They scaled it the other way, so the more money you make, the less percentage revenue share you have to give. They could do something like that. The money that they make is kind of, if you're going to make even like billions really off of one game, is the service you're providing that worth it? Surely not. I don't think they do enough to warrant that money. And then, well, the whole privacy thing just makes me laugh because it's a whole I mean, privacy does matter to people. Like, it does like matter to me for some reason, even though like what are they possibly going to really do to me with some of the information they have on me. Obviously, other than advertise products that I probably don't.
I was going to say they're going to advertise you more like Godzilla merch.
But yeah, that's true. Yeah, but it is kind of like a manufactured issue in some ways. But obviously, it comes off the back of big tech, probably back to Cambridge Analytica, whatever people think of that. It probably birthed that kind of issue with privacy. Anyway, I feel like I'm getting off topic, but that was kind of the big news of the week. Aaron, any thoughts?
I mean, as you were saying with the whole privacy thing, like that always feels like the argument they fall back to, as if it's there's no disputing it. It's like, yeah, fair enough, you've won. So it almost makes it feel like, yeah, the walled garden for their consumers is also like their shield against the anyone criticising them. But, yeah, obviously And as you were saying, like the amount that they've been fined currently, like whether that is really going to make a difference. Obviously, like 500 million euros, sorry, is a crazy amount of money. But as you were saying, for a company of Apple's size, yeah, whether that's going to be enough to change things. And I was reminded as well of a story I covered earlier in the week where you were saying about like the 30% fees there that we wrote about Roblox's revenue from the past year. And it was interesting looking at that. Apparently 80% of their this is relevant, but 80% of their users are on mobile, and they contribute 46% of the Robux revenue. So 30% of Robux revenue is from, and it was interesting reading through that they noted like App Store fees are one of their major expenses that they just obviously have to accept, which makes sense, but it was just, yeah, I was caught a bit by surprise to kind of see it in writing that, yeah, like that is a major expense for them, which makes sense at their scale. And if,
Yeah.
you know, basically a third of their revenue comes from the App Store, and if they're giving nearly a third of that away, that is obviously a lot for Apple to be taking. And as you say, like what kind of service is Apple providing to warrant that?
Yeah, it's like, well, what's the price tag that Apple puts on a user? And apparently it's infinite. Because after, you know, they have the platform. I mean, the whole thing gets ridiculous, right? Because user acquisition, or Apple search ads. So Apple charges a 30% fee generally. I know it's different in the EU, which we're kind of discussing, but it gets stupidly confusing, the alternative business terms. But say we were just talking about 30%. They charge 30%. And then, on top of that, if you want to use Apple search ads, so if you want to appear at the top of the search for Roblox, you have to give Apple more money, right? Whilst you do appear, Apple does obviously provide a service and it does deserve to be paid, right, for what it does. But they don't give you user acquisition for free. You have to pay for it. Obviously, there's some featuring in that. And then obviously you spend loads of money on user acquisition elsewhere. So it's just the fine margins that developers end up getting. Just a little bit insane. Is basically we're getting at. And don't forget, I guess one of my last thoughts on kind of the App Store in particular is that, you know, other big companies have complained about it in the past and have not launched their products, right? So you've got, I think it's like Xbox Cloud Gaming, or the Xbox Marketplace isn't really launching because, well, this is allegedly, I still don't believe it exists. They're not really launching on the App Store or at all, because they can't, because 30% is too much, and there's nothing to get around it. And then Facebook Instant Games, I was reminded earlier, I think was it last year? It might have been this year. It just finally got like in-app purchases on the App Store. And I'm just thinking, why? I was reporting on that, I don't know when now, 7-8 years ago. and Instant Games has kind of really faded away. Maybe it's coming back. I'm talking specifically about Facebook. Because it used to be the Messenger, and then they stopped that, and it would just be on the Facebook platform itself. Yeah, it's like Apple has really stifled so much innovation in the industry because of these terms that they really need to start relenting on it a bit, to be honest. But this is how it goes, I guess, when you're a monopoly. I would like to say that if they don't relent, then, you know, they'll end up coming irrelevant, but that's not going to be the case ever. Right, so I spent ages talking about that one, but Aaron, you've got more about monopolies.
Yeah, it's a bit of a theme today. So yeah, as well as Apple's legal goings on, Google has been found guilty of illegal ad tech monopolies. So basically, they were found guilty of willfully acquiring and maintaining monopoly power in publisher ad servers and ad exchanges that sit between buyers and sellers. So this was reported by Reuters, and the ruling was made on April 17th. And it stated that Google's publisher tools basically excluded rivals and violated antitrust laws. The US District Judge Leonie Brinkema wrote that in addition to depriving rivals of the ability to compete, this exclusionary conduct substantially harmed Google's publisher customers the competitive process and ultimately consumers of information on the open web. Obviously, Google has plans to appeal the decision. They're basically arguing against their tools having adverse impacts. So they already, or at least their spin on it was that they already won half the case because the Department of Justice failed to demonstrate how the advertiser tools or certain acquisitions have been anti-competitive, even though they kind of lost on the grounds of monopolising. I guess their argument was that, well, just confusingly, they half won, half lost because the Department of Justice couldn't prove that it was anti-competitive what they had done. Anyway, probably a bit shorter than the Apple news, but just, they've been found guilty, but they're going to appeal it.
Trouble with Google is in the Fortnite case against them as well, right? Their behaviour is the issue. It's not just that they have formed a monopoly. It is that they have been, as in these cases, found and ruled at least to kind of be actively suppressing competition and in ways that is anti-competitive. That's their big issue. And now they've kind of really brought it upon themselves. Whether they get broken up, I don't know. It does seem maybe some of the remedies for for this case might be breaking up Google a bit. I don't want to pretend I know loads about kind of the ad space, to be honest. But I have been reading around comments, and one guy that used to work at Google, and he was saying, basically it was a monopoly. They had an unfair advantage, really, over everyone. They said it was obvious back when, I guess, they made certain acquisitions. There's the other side. Again, I'm basically trying to make sense of this through what other people, for what actual experts have said. But some people are like, well, is Google? I think this might have been through Eric Seufert or someone in commenting on one of his posts, perhaps. So Eric Seufert, Mobile Dev Memo, the expert on this stuff. They were saying that, well, maybe is Google like, okay, it's kind of like in a way, it's like a bad actor. I don't think that's the way they necessarily put it. But maybe Google is also because it was making a lot of money and doing so successful out of it. Were they also the ones that are propping up like the open web in face of kind of app stores? Which I thought was interesting. If they're not powering the internet as a kind of money-making source for ads, like who's doing that? Obviously, there are other companies, but at such a scale to make it kind of worth your while. Does someone else step in? Does it make the web as it was less interesting? The other thing with Google is obviously, if you work in the media, it's just so tremendously, like, you rely on Google so much for everything, and anytime they ever change anything, it can be devastating. So usually that's to do with search, but it could end up being the same with ads. If something changed, that could be devastating. So I'm curious what this leads to. And obviously, because again, this is a US ruling, a breakup is on the cards, but we'll see what happens. So moving on, the next story, the Discord CEO, Jason Citron, has stepped down. So the messaging platform itself was launched 10 years ago. Originally, Discord was actually a game developer, and then they had this platform, and then they just decided to roll it out and just become this communications platform that has really since taken over the world for games. Like, I use it, I imagine most, if not all really, people that play games on their PCs at least use this to chat with each other. It's such a good platform for that. And it's become such a good platform for building games communities as well. So, but after building it, and they want to go public, they've made no secret of that. In his leaving posts, he mentions that their future of potentially going public, they definitely are. But yeah, he's stepping away. The games guy is gone, and in his place is the former King president and Activision Blizzard vice chairman, Humam Saknini. I think he also used to work at McKinsey as a consultant. I think it's quite a surprise that Jason is leaving before all this happens, but I guess that's the route they want to go down, that they think's best. He's still on the board of directors, so he's not like going far. He's going to be an advisor to the new chief exec. But yeah, they've just gone a different way. Apparently, Discord now serves 200 million monthly active users. The company has a focus on pursuing opportunities beyond its core consumer subscription service, including advertising, microtransactions, and providing social infrastructure to developers. It claims to have a positive adjusted EBITDA for the past 5 quarters. Yeah, really, really interesting. They're obviously going to go public. I hope it turns out well for Discord, because it has become important to both developers, publishers, and consumers. And so if they start, as a public company, the fear will be that they really they've reached scale now, and now they've got to increase investor value. And so they start squeezing everyone for as much money as possible. That's my fear. They can't obviously, well, it says they're a bit just growing. They can't obviously be money, like they can't lose money, right? So they deserve to make money. But I think what everyone have to watch out for over the next few years is what are they going to do to drive revenue further, which could be concerning, especially those tight margins we're already talking about earlier. Aaron, what have you got next?
Yeah, so next up from me is Ubisoft has partnered with Immutable to develop a mobile Web3 Might and Magic game. So this new one, it's the 12th game in the series, apparently, and it is Might and Magic Fates. So it's also the second game in the series to be on mobile following 19's Might and Magic Era of Chaos. So this is one that I wrote up earlier today at the time of us recording. And it was interesting when I was looking into it, because there were various press releases about it. Reminded me a bit of when the Niantic Scopely news was going on, and like everywhere you looked was another kind of official source explaining it. But so obviously Immutable has like the Web3 blockchain platform, so you would already imagine them partnering up means there is a Web3 element, which there indeed is. But Ubisoft I got the impression, at least from reading their press release, that they were a bit cautious about telling people that, even though they're trying to like advertise their game. Because their press release and Immutable's didn't clearly say what the Web3 elements were at all. So it's a trading card, like deck builder game. So obviously, logically, you would think that the cards are going to be the NFTs, which does seem to be the case. But yeah, neither of their press releases clarified that. Rather, like Ubisoft basically explained that the trading is going to be possible through Immutable's marketplace and only in eligible regions. But basically, don't worry if you can't trade. There's no competitive advantage to trading. So if you don't want to be part of it, then you don't have to worry about that, which, really seemed like kind of tiptoeing around it. And anyway, so then I was reading through Immutable's press release, which still didn't really clarify that the cards are the NFTs. So I then went on Might and Magic Fate's website and read through all the stuff, and the front page doesn't mention it anywhere. It just says that it's a trading card game. So it was like the last point at the end of the FAQ page on their website confirms that the cards are NFTs.
It says it explicitly.
So yeah, right at the end of the FAQ page, basically, it confirms Might and Magic Fates is a free-to-play card game at its core with an optional Web3 layer that unlocks digital ownership for players who want it. This means you'll have the opportunity to freely trade your cards using the Immutable blockchain, but it's entirely optional and offers no competitive advantage. So yeah, the cards are the Web3 element on Immutable blockchain. But yeah, you really have to dig quite deep to actually get that confirmed, which, maybe not a great sign for their confidence in doing a Web3 entry.
I mean, I know for a fact that it's kind of the PR MO for these things, particularly when it's like a big IP. It's really NFTs is either don't or Web3, but particularly NFTs. Don't do it as was company level. But the PR thing is now don't tell people. We've had a few speakers at Pocket Gamer Connects that I think because it's such a toxic, well, NFTs particularly, it's so toxic as a word in the industry now amongst consumers that you just can't be open about it. That isn't to say necessarily that users would actually, in a game, that some users would even notice or care about these things. Sometimes they will, and rightly so, with previous examples, because I think it's often looked as some of the poor implementations that there have been. Sometimes it feels like a cheap cash grab, right? But this tech could be interesting. Interested to see what happens with this. I don't think Well, we'll see what happens with Immutable. I don't think Ubisoft is the one to make this work. I don't think we'll see much of this game in like a year's, well, whenever it comes out, but in like a year's time. It's again just kind of Ubisoft doing some strange things. Can they not just make a good mobile game, like using an IP? Did it have to have this layer? Did this enhance the game? I guess is the question. I don't really get why they've done this, and also I get they're already working on it, but they've just gone through this big. They've gone through some really like kind of tough times. Assassin's Shadow it looks like it's been pretty successful, right? But then they had the kind of the Tencent investment, and then they've got this new subsidiary. Just happens to have all their IP. Very strange deal. Looks like they're trying to stop a takeover. Anyway, they what am I trying to say? They were going to focus on their core IPs, which was not Might and Magic. I just don't really get why they keep doing this stuff. Like, why don't they just focus on some other things? At least this is their own IP. I don't know. It seems a very strange project for Ubisoft to be doing. You could argue at its best, pretty big. People won't agree with this, but at its best, I'm talking about many a moon ago, Ubisoft was actually great because it would come out of some sort of quirky project that's really fun, like Mario and Rabbids. That's kind of wacky. And I was like, oh yeah, it's kind of good that Ubisoft does that because they don't just do their big AAA games. They will do some other stuff. But then it kind of spiraled a bit. And then the AAA stuff some of it wasn't as interesting anymore, I'd argue, outside of maybe Assassin's Creed. Far Cry is getting a bit tired, in my opinion. And then they looked like they kept doing more and more of these other projects. It's like, okay, we need to maybe tighten the ship a bit. But unfortunately, it's all a bit too late, and there's been loads of layoffs and Tencent investment. Now we'll see what happens. Yeah, anyway, moral of the story is, strange project for Ubisoft to be doing.
Yeah, and it just seems strange to me I know, as you're saying, they don't want to kind of shout too loudly about the NFT elements, but I guess surely they're in there for the people that are into NFT stuff for them to get on board with the game.
But surely to be a game with meaningful returns, you can't just go for those people. You have to go for fans of that IP, how many of them there are, I don't know still. And then you just have to go for a wider audience. The last thing I did actually want to touch upon, and I'll do it very quickly, is Drake Star Partners has released their new report, the Global Gaming Report for Q1 2025. And looking at M&A, it was interesting that they said M&A has rebounded in Q1 with 48 announced deals totaling $4.4 billion in disclosed value. This marks the highest quarterly deal value in nearly 2 years and a strong recovery from the dip seen in Q4 2024. Obviously, there's one big deal that kind of takes over. Scopely's $3.5 billion acquisition of Niantic, powered by Savvy Games Group, was the largest gaming deal in Q1, and the biggest since Scopely itself was acquired by Savvy for $4.9 billion in 2023. Other notable M&A activity this quarter included Triple Dot's reported $900 million acquisition of AppLovin's games division, although that's not gone through, right? That's not gone through. It's just reported, and Triple Dot is the buyer. We'll find out this quarter. I thought it was supposed to be at the end of Q1, but I guess we'll find out this quarter if that's actually going to happen. Because even in the stuff that was said publicly by AppLovin, it's like, well, Triple Dot might not have all the funds, although AppLovin's got to then fund it itself. It gets very strange. A theme of this podcast, a lot of strange things happening. And then other deals were Miniclip's acquisition of German mobile studio Lesmore and Krafton's purchase of Nautilus Mobile. Q1 also saw 149 private placements totaling $3.5 billion in disclosed value. The largest was a reported $3 billion investment received by Infinite Reality at a valuation exceeding $12 billion. Notable rounds, Grand Games, Good Job Games, etc. And then there's new gaming funds. I think we've probably gone through this before. Tilting Point, 150 million. Arcadia Gaming Advisors, which is actually Triple Doc's Akin, their former president, 100 million. Skills, 75 million. Leighton Ventures, 50 million. I feel like Leighton was last year. Maybe I'm confused. Which wouldn't be a surprise. Yeah, I guess a good sign for M&A. Obviously, there's the big deals that are kind of powering it. So once again, we'll see how it goes For the rest of the year, Drakestar's outlook is we anticipate a gradual uptick in M&A activity over the rest of the year. Key buyers to watch include Savvy and Scopely, Tencent, Krafton, Keyword Studios /EQT, Jagex /CVC, so they're like the owners of those companies. Infinite Reality again, Sony, and Asmodee. Private equity firms are expected to remain very active, with several publicly traded companies potentially being taken private. Interesting. Key growth segments are expected to include AI, tech platforms, and blockchain. We're still banging that blockchain drum. It's like it goes, it comes back, it sort of goes, it's still here. Blockchain ones are always the ones that raise ridiculous amounts of money. It said later stage financings will likely continue to be challenging. If public markets stabilize, we'll see how that goes. Surely that is not a theme of this year. Unless in the next 100 days, the whole tariff situation is sorted. No more trade wars, which, good luck. But if public markets stabilize, Drakestar said Coffee Stain is expected to go public soon, so Goat Simulator, as part of a spin-out from Embracer. Oh yeah, of course, there's that Coffee Stain. Do you know what? I forgot all about it. Coffee Stain and Friends. Asmodee and Friends, Coffee Stain and Friends, and Middle Earth and Friends were the tentative names, I think, for these companies. Anyway, other gaming companies, including Discord, are reportedly preparing for IPOs, as we've discussed. So, could be a big year for M&A. Some money's flying back in. We'll see how the year goes. So, we've chatted a lot today. But that brings us to the end of the PocketGamer.biz week in mobile games. Thanks everyone for tuning in again and listening. We hope you found it interesting. As always, please do leave us some feedback if you have any. Thank you very much, Aaron, for taking part in the show.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, very excited to be here for the 51st episode.
For the 51st.
Real milestone this week.
It's going to be interesting how we do this over the next couple of weeks, because I'll be in Brazil and then Dubai. Hopefully I can find somewhere where we can record. Yeah. So we will be back.
So I guess whilst joking about the 51st there, like 52 episodes, that is a full year's worth of weekly episodes. Obviously we've been going longer than that, but there's some value to 52 as a
some value. We'll keep making it up, like, there's some value to 53.
Yeah.
57. What can we link that to? So anyway, thanks once again. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.